Stand by for broadcast.
You're listening to Inside Air, a behind-the-wire view of the Royal Air Force, its people, technology and operations.
Hello, I'm Flight Lieutenant Peter Lisney, and in this episode we look at social mobility and why the RAF is funding postgraduate degrees. We'll also reheat a few stories, just in case you missed them, but first, see if you can identify this noise. Find out if you're right at the end of this episode. Now, per Ardua Ad Astra, through adversity to the stars. It's the RAF's motto, but how does this apply to the RAF's people, both uniformed and civil service? Can anyone reach the stars? Later, Flight Lieutenant Amy Casey looks into the Chief of the Air Staff's fellowship that funds aviators of any rank through a master's degree or even a doctorate. But first, we asked Flight Lieutenant Chris Sully to see if there is social mobility within the RAF.
When you've got that uniform on, it is quite a leveller. It doesn't, you can't dress in posher clothes than someone else. You can't have, an old school tie, or these other things that we might think of as influencing sort of symbols.
Over a long career, you get to work with lots of great people. You get to work with one or two that you'd rather not see again. And again, it doesn't matter. You can't pigeonhole the types of people in terms of the background that they've come from.
Hello, I'm Air Vice Marshal Richard Madison. My full title is Air Officer Commanding 22 Group, which basically means I deliver most of the training in the Royal Air Force before you get to your final frontline conversion, and I also lead on training policy. As a background, I've been a helicopter pilot through much of my career. I've been involved in training before, but like many people in the Air Force, in many different roles as well.
Hello, I'm Steve Locke. I'm the Director of Resources for Air Command, which means I'm the Chief Financial Officer, I'm the Civilian Workforce Advisor, and the representative of the Permanent Secretary on the Air Force Board. My background, I'm now a 27-year veteran of the civil service and the government finance function, having started what feels like, it is quarter of a century ago, as basically an admin clerk in DWP, and I've worked my way through since.
Sir, if I can come to you first of all, give us a bit about your background, because the assumption somebody who's made it to be an Air Vice Marshal has come from a particular background is definitely not true in your case, is it?
No, it's not, but it's probably also not true in many others as well. It's an easy mistake to make. For me personally, I grew up in Hartlepool in the northeast of England. My stepmom is a southerner, so I don't necessarily sound like I've come from there, but very much comprehensive school educated, and a relatively humble background in terms of no holidays, no sort of big adventures, but still I'd like to think I had a very happy childhood. The thing that really sort of got me towards the Air Force was the Air Training Corps, the Air Cadets as people know it, and that was the foundation of an interest in the Air Force and the delivery of a number of opportunities through cadet camps, through flying opportunities as air experience flights. And then I managed to get through the Royal Air Force a flying scholarship, which allowed me to go up to Glasgow, the longest time I'd ever been away, to learn to fly, to go solo in an aircraft. And following that, I was fortunate enough to receive an invitation to go for selection for full-time entry into the Air Force. And that's what I did at the age of 18 back in 1988, direct from comprehensive school. And the rest is really history. I've had a great time.
If we can take you back to that moment, so at age 13, you joined the Air Cadets. Had there been any military background to your family at all until that point?
So, no, not at all, unless you go back to my grandfather. My father grew up during the war, left school at 15, was the first Madison to ever own his own home, which he was immensely proud of. So there wasn't really a history at all. What got me into the Air Cadets was simply that I had friends in school that were a little bit older and they got in first. And once I reached the age limit, I joined as soon as I could. And that really sort of captured the imagination for me. So it's been a great journey. And actually for my father, who's still around and is getting fragile now, but he's really sort of proud. And if you think of social mobility as, your children doing perhaps better than you did yourself, he's very much proud of what the Air Force has given me.
So you finally find yourself at Cranwell. How typical was your background at that stage compared to how it is now?
At Cranwell, I was the youngest on my course to graduate. Quite a high proportion of the people, maybe less so than nowadays where university education is more popular, but quite a high proportion have been to university. There were also a number that had been selected for commissioning, having already got service. So of the 12 in my flight, 2 of the individuals were ex-corporals. And I think that was a great indicator that even then the Air Force was looking to give people an opportunity to do better than they perhaps originally thought. But I was very much the one with little life experience, having not had a curry before or a Chinese or been away. All these things were new to me. But thankfully, actually, the Air Force just took the sort of raw product and helped me along the way. So I was very lucky. I remember my flight commander saying at the end, well, we could keep you back and make you do something again, but actually, I think we just need to move you on and let you enjoy it. And I'm grateful that he said that.
Steve, if I can come to you and just sort of go through your experience as well and just talk us through how you found that to be.
My background, a bit similar to Rich's, really. I was born into a normal working class family in Leeds. We lived on a council estate. Dad drove a bus for a living, which was perfectly great career job that helped him support his family. Mum worked part time when she worked usually bar work. Two natural brothers and an adopted brother as well, because we did a lot of short-term fostering when I grew up. But I would just class it as a normal working class family. I attended school, never set the world on light at school, but came out with set of O levels and then some A levels. And a bit like as Rich mentioned, family holidays for me were day trips to the East Coast, so Scarborough, Bridden, Filey. That was where holidays were spent, and I say usually day trips rather than a week away. But it was a very loving and a very supportive environment. But there was no role model or aspiration to go on to a career in as a senior executive or running a business or anything like that. It was just and it was just an okay education and then into a job. But I did start working early. I've always been I'm going to say blessed with a work ethic. Some might say cursed, but blessed with a work ethic. So right from the age of 13, I was doing part-time work. I was doing paper rounds, and somehow I always managed to progress in whatever job I was doing. So the paper rounds led into weekend work in the newsagents. I had a flair for mathematics and finance, so I used to do the cashing up at the end of the week and support the newsagent doing that. I then followed actually my brother and my mum into doing some bar work. So glass collecting led to working behind a bar, and then eventually I left the comprehensive school at 18. As lots of people do. I suppose the difference to lots of other people at the point I left was within a few months I was married and had already started a family. And then about 21, 22, we'd had our second child, and I was working long days retail and hardly seeing my young family and thinking there must be more to life than this. So I actually took what lots of people consider a brave step, and for me just seemed the right thing to do, and left work to take a year out to go to university, actually to study what used to be called the Foundation in Accounting, which used to give you the exam passes to get through the first stage of all the accountancy bodies, and then you'd start your finance career from then onwards. Did well in that year. Passed the course, some actually knuckled down and got a decent level of pass, excellent results in that actually, but then struggled then to actually get a role in any of the big accountancy firms at the time. So I had a friend who was working in the civil service at the time in the big DWP or benefits agencies. It was then headquarters in Leeds. They got me a temporary job there, and I've never looked back since, really.
You spoke about having a work ethic from a young age. That's obviously a big part of this, but also you touched on the fact that your talent was recognized. How important is it to have mentors, somebody that spots early on, and how geared up is the system now, do you think, to do that from an early stage within the structure?
It's vital, especially when you're coming from lower socioeconomic background and you haven't had those role models growing up. You don't know what the opportunities are out there. If all the example you've ever had is working in manual jobs, then that's generally where your career goes. I mean, we can all point to families where the fourth, fifth generation senior military or fourth, fifth generation doctors or whatever the profession is. So to not have those role models at home, it's really vital that you get those in the workplace. As I say, my talent, my capability was recognised. I had some great line managers early on that were willing to give me a chance, give me my head, empower me and give me that responsibility to do things. So that's something I've always tried to do in my career. Then is support other people in their careers and their aspirations.
And for you, sir, a similar sort of view of things, I suspect.
I guess so. You know what? I was listening to Steve and I was feeling quite bad because I didn't work anywhere near as hard as he did when I was younger. I just sort of went to school, didn't really perform very well, managed to get in the Air Force, hadn't worked very much before apart from a bit of potato picking. But one thing I would say about the Air Force is that when you've got that uniform on, it is quite a leveler. It doesn't, you can't dress in posher clothes than someone else. You can't have, an old school tie, all these other things that we might think of as influencing sort of symbols. You're in your uniform. It's up to you to look smart and it's up to you to do your job. And I think in my case, the sort of formal mentoring didn't, kind of wasn't really there. But if I look at, say, going through flying training, my flying training was a mixture of, I've got great friends that, had clearly gone to great schools and to Oxford and Cambridge, but it didn't matter. We were all in a flying suit and we'd all come back and have had a good trip or a bad trip. And, they're still friends. It was a great equalizer. So actually the progression in your job and being good at your job and being supportive of others was the key thing that sort of, was what people were looking for. And I was lucky in that a lot of the people I worked for were like that. So they would, sort of help me. It wasn't a formal sort of mentoring, but, it's in your interest. If you're going to potentially go to war with someone, you want them to be on top of their game. And so I think I have been genuinely just really lucky to be in an organization where, okay, maybe it's a factor for you at some point, but I do think you put the uniform on and people can't tell. And that's a great thing.
I can understand that as you progress through training and a career, but in those early days of basic training, in those early days of bonding as a team and getting to know people, when people are working out where you stand and where they stand in comparison to you, were there ever times when you felt that it was something that held you back, or was it always just, no, actually, we are completely level here?
I don't think I ever felt held back. I remember in training someone telling me it was a computer, not a computer. In a sort of a northeast way, and the idea that these days you would, tell someone off for having a Scottish accent or a Geordie accent or a sort of a Welsh accent is crazy. So we're a fun organisation, and we don't, we don't take away that fun. I mean, it's what I enjoy about it. But no, actually, it's been pretty good for me. I must admit, and I hope that many of the people that I've served alongside across the years would think the same.
How important, though, do you feel it is to make sure that once you've arrived, as it were, you've gained promotion and you've moved on through your career, that you don't pull the ladder up after yourself?
Yeah, I think it is important. And, one thing where you do get a sense of someone's background, and I see it a lot at my level, is when you read the biography. You quite often get sent the details of the person you're going to meet. And some of them, sound really impressive, was sort of educated at, so-and-so school and Magdalen College, Oxford, or whatever. And I think it's important that you're not put off by that, because they might be a great person or they might be a rubbish person. You judge them as a person. So mine starts off thanks to the Air Training Corps, Rich Madison joined the Royal Air Force Direct from Comprehensive School in Hartlepool. And the interesting thing is I felt quite conscious when I sort of deliberately went along those lines. And actually a member of my team, not one of my current teams, sort of suggested that I might have another kind of biography that I might send out for sort of other purposes. And I just sort of said, no, this is my biography. This is who I am. And so I think people have learned to sort of realize that it's okay. And it's okay to sort of highlight that it doesn't matter. People will judge you for you are. And weirdly, the amount of comments I get about the biography from people who say, oh, it's really interesting that, that you're involved in this, involved in that. I think it is important. And Steve is the same, that, he isn't shy about the fact that he's, come from a tough background, but he also works with people that are good or bad, depending on how they are.
Steve, I guess you certainly echo those comments.
Oh, absolutely. Over a long career, you get to work with lots of great people. You get to work with one or two that you'd rather not see again. And again, it doesn't matter. You can't pigeonhole the types of people in terms of the background that they've come from. I mean, there's a couple of things that Rich said there. That there's an element of jealousy is probably too strong. Envy is probably the right word in terms of when Rich was talking there about wearing the uniform and that being a leveler. That is, I think that's really important, and something I've not maybe thought about as much in terms of the RAF, because my impression of the RAF, of the military over the last 5 years, is you all display your rank. So therefore everybody knows where they are in that traditional pecking order. But I suppose that's because part of that's the impression I have coming into Air Command, that's very officer heavy, not being in those training environments where people do all look the same, are going through the same experiences, and getting that real level playing field from that point of view. It's interesting as well. Rich mentioned kind of accent there and then pronunciation. Most people can pretty much peg where I'm come from when I start talking, despite almost 10, well, probably nearly 15 years now doing a lot of work in Whitehall and the southeast. This is going to sound a bit posh, but I was at a dinner in London last night that was hosted by Deloitte for a group of finance directors across government. But again, it was great. Around that table of a dozen folk, there were 5 of us that were from either the northeast or from Yorkshire, all at this 2-star director level within government finance, and all being supported and developed because we have been. People think we've got potential, which is a great thing to progress even further. So for me, there's great opportunity there, and the more we do about giving people opportunity in the location where they live, the more we'll break down some of these social barriers that have existed in the past.
We're on the edge of 2022 now. We're hearing regional accents and voices all the time. If you watch Continuity, the bits between the programmes on telly, you hear regional accents all the time, which is fantastic. Was there ever a time in the early days for either of you that you felt the need to kind of hide your accent? Did you ever feel how needed with the received English bit and sound like the Queen?
So it's interesting, isn't it? Because I've been in the Air Force for 33 years, and I wonder if I have. I wonder if that young lad that they sort of said it's a computer, not a computer, actually has been influenced by it. But I don't consciously think I've ever tried to do it. There is something about brevity, clarity on radios, in air traffic, and the rest of it. But I do wonder whether you might have something there, Chris. And I hope that isn't the case. I mean, I don't hold it against Steve for being a Southerner from Yorkshire, but I'm glad that he still makes clear his Southern roots by the way he talks. I wish I was perhaps a little bit more obvious.
I can't let the comment about being a Southerner go, as Rich fully knows that I wouldn't. But I think again, what that illustrates is it's all about perspectives, isn't it? And it's all about where you're sitting and where you're looking defines how you perceive things. For me, that's really important in understanding things like the social mobility and other barriers to inclusivity. But coming back to your earlier question about have I ever felt a need to change my accent? Well, if I've ever felt the need, I've not been successful in doing it. However, like Rich, we're all influenced by our environment, by the role modelling that we see, by the phrases that we hear, the way that people speak. Especially when you're in that work environment and attending meetings, is you get exposed to new things. Some of those things you adopt, some of those things you don't. Sometimes you do that subconsciously.
Rightly or wrongly, did you find, Steve, ever when you spoke to somebody on the phone for the first time, they formed an opinion because of the accent maybe, and then when you met them face to face, it was a different relationship?
Actually, that's never been something that's been a problem for me that I've been aware of. Doesn't mean it hasn't happened, but no, it's never been a problem I've been aware of. I mean, it's great, isn't it? In the last 2 years, all of us are so much more comfortable in technology, so much more comfortable with doing meetings and business remotely. And now we're all looking forward to seeing each other again and seeing whether the photos that we see on the screen match the physical person that we're now seeing. But no, it's not something that I've been conscious has been a problem. And I say, for most people that meet me, I think a lot of them think, oh yeah, that's the person we've heard on the call.
I think for me, I almost go the other way in that I don't think people make any judgments about me, but sometimes I'll go into a room and I'll suddenly feel like I'm surrounded by people who, are posh, for want of a better phrase. And even recently, I was on a course where there were incredibly bright people around there, from across government, and they all struck me as really good. They're broadly about sort of, 50-50 male, female, but someone made the point about there being too many middle-aged white men there. And actually, from my perspective, I felt like the outsider. I felt if there was going to be a bit of diversity of thought, it was probably as much to come from the person who went to comprehensive school in Hartlepool as it was to the group of men and women who had, I bet a high proportion of them being quite well educated and gone to university, certainly the vast majority of them. So I'm not sure people judge me, and there's probably something about rank that sort of, maybe sort of, people sort of make an assumption about you. But I still at times, sort of feel a little bit underconfident when I'm sort of knowingly around people that just quite obviously are from a different background. And I've got to force that out of my mind because, as I said earlier, they might be great, they might be rubbish. I just have to judge them on how they are, not the fact that they may or may not have, sort of had a better background than I had. That wasn't their choice.
And I think that's a really important point to get across because we're talking here via the Inside Air podcast to people of all ranks and others who may be thinking of joining the Royal Air Force. If you're still feeling that occasionally as an Air Vice Marshal, that's actually quite reassuring in a way because you've obviously found mechanisms and ways to cope with that. But if you're still feeling that as an AVM, it's natural that people throughout the food chain are going to feel the same thing.
Yeah, and actually, being aware of yourself, being aware of, others is not a bad thing. I think it's Steve mentioned unconscious bias. We do have to sort of be careful that we don't make assumptions about people, that they don't make them about us. And the example I gave just now, when everyone sort of said this, well, you're all kind of the same, aren't you? I sort of said, well, actually, we might look the same, but that doesn't mean we are the same. And I use the unconscious bias phrase to just sort of dig back a little bit, that don't make an assumption about me just because I'm in a meeting in a jacket and tie. That's not necessarily how I see myself as a sort of, and as a person, I see myself as a Royal Air Force member.
I mean, just picking up on that, if I can. I mean, I almost daily I am in situations where I kind of look around and I have to pinch myself and think, how did I end up in this meeting, in this room with these people? Given where I started from, and like Rich said there, sometimes I still have that internal mental reaction that says I shouldn't be here. That's as strong as the thought is that I shouldn't be here. What am I doing here? I'm out of my depth. But then you adjust that to that, and you think, how actually no, I'm here because of the role that I do, the contribution that I've made, that I'm making, the fact that I've been in that organisation and made that contribution, and that's been recognised. So you were there on merit, and it's important to remind yourself you are there on merit from the work that you have done, the contribution that you've made, and the contribution that you continue to make. And again, we're much more aware nowadays of the importance of that inclusivity, that diversity of thought, as Rich put it. So diversity for me has always been more than people's background and characteristics. It's the different contribution that they make. I mean, I'm male, I'm northern, I'm an accountant, I'm an introvert. There's an awful lot of things there that I know I am, which means I try to surround myself with people that are different from me, because I know what I'm thinking. What I need to know is what other people are thinking. And then we can share ideas, and we often come to a different conclusion. And certainly, some of the best people I work with absolutely challenge my thinking and my view of the world, and even down to their feelings on something. If my feelings aren't replicated, I'll chat to them and ask, well, why are you feeling like that? Why did you make that comment? Why does that make you feel that way? Because I'm constantly trying to learn. But why have I done that? Because actually, again, I've invested in myself, which has been quite difficult, to understand my personality type, my reaction to things, and then think about how I can use that to lead people and support people better. And again, the opportunity to do that has been provided to me through the civil service that's constantly encouraging us, to do development, to think about where our strengths are and build on those, where our weaknesses are, and creates those opportunities for learning and development.
So much of this comes back to the team, the leadership, the fellowship. What's being done, though, practically to spot talent early on? Maybe, Sarah, in your case, so phase one training for people that come in. How can we spot that early and progress that and give people the confidence that they can actually reach all the way?
I think the first thing, Chris, is that it probably starts before that training begins. We've got a recruitment and selection process which is pretty advanced, and it will measure and test against things that are sort of, immaterial of your background. If you're going to be a pilot, and you will do tests on, hand-to-eye coordination and spatial awareness and sort of mental agility, those are things that you can't really sort of buy, and it's hard to sort of train against. And so there is an element of bringing people down and letting them have a go. And what we're seeing now is increasingly a sort of a broadening of the outreach that we have into schools, also into organisations such as the Air Cadets. And it's important to understand the Air Cadets isn't about recruitment. The vast majority will just go on and have had a better time as a result of the cadets. But about 25-30% of the Royal Air Force are ex-cadets by chance. And that, again, is the one where it doesn't matter about your background. It's that level of putting you in uniform again, and you will go through. Our recruitment and selection team are also looking at just how they can help people. If you can't get to our selection centre, they can perhaps get to you, of making sure that, the traditional selection when I went through is, you wear a suit. And I remember having to buy a suit in order to go down to do that, which wasn't easy. And so relaxing dress standards for things like the selection, of testing people almost regardless of their background to make sure their opportunities are there. And then, of course, you go through the training itself, and very quickly you will hopefully be productive. And then we have a system which is about as fair as I think you possibly can, because we will write appraisal reports on your performance. You get an opportunity to see them, and eventually you will go forward to things like a promotion board. And the promotion board doesn't get to meet you. It's not like a job interview that people might think of in a company where you could perhaps give that impression. You could wear that school tie. They will see the text of the reports that's written on you. They won't get to see your picture. They won't be able to make judgments about that. They will judge it on the evidence alone. And that is, the first step of progression. Now, at my level, people know who I am, but we're an organisation of over 30,000 people. And so certainly in those early stages, it's very much a meritocracy, and it's about as blind as it can be to the things that might influence people.
And Steve, from your perspective, what can a non-graduate civil servant expect as they start their career?
So I would hope, graduate or non-graduate, a civil servant or anybody that enters the civil service, whether it's the start of a career or a re-entry from a previous career, can expect support and encouragement from their line manager. For the civil service now, over the last 10 years, it's really modernised in terms of its recruitment practices, that you don't have to go through coming in at an entry level and then progression through every single grade. All jobs now are externally advertised. All jobs are open for anybody to apply if you've got the relevant skills and experience. So that gives people sometimes that shortcut into a role. But then once you're into role, the key thing really is getting the right leadership contribution and cadre, so that leaders are actually supporting people development in their development, and we spend an awful lot of time supporting and encouraging that. I mean, and we have lots and lots of development schemes available to people, again, at all levels, through apprenticeships from levels 2 right up to level 7. There are opportunities at any time in your career to take advantage of those. And the civil service fast stream, which again has been traditionally the preserve, and still I think sometimes perceived as the preserve of the Oxbridge candidate turning into the Whitehall Mandarin. But as an existing civil servant, you don't have the same entry standard to apply for the fast stream. If you've got the skills and talent that you've developed in work and demonstrated, you can apply through an in-service route. And even the external recruitment now, I think the stats are something like, in the 2019 intake, over 70% of the successful candidates for the fast stream came from normal state education, if I can put it like that. And so I think all those things are an environment that's changed over time, that is about spotting talent early, supporting talent. Yes, there's an emphasis on the individual in helping them progress their career, but there's a real emphasis through line management chains in talent management, in succession planning, and putting some of those systems and processes in place that help us have the right conversation with people, point people to the opportunities that are there, and encourage them to take those up.
I think in the Air Force we can be a bit formulaic, or appear a bit formulaic, but when you write an appraisal report on someone, there's a specific indicator of their potential. If they got can they reach sort of several ranks higher? Are they really exciting? Are they suitable for commissioning? And you do see people that are identified, that will progress through the ranks, whether officers or not. And of course, many of them will progress, having joined the Air Force not as an officer. About 25% of our officer training courses are people who've already served in the Air Force, where someone has said to them, have you thought about this? They've perhaps joined a commissioning club, been given a bit of support from their peers, have spoken to their bosses or other people on their unit, and actually then sort of taken the leap. And I think it's one of the nicest things to see when you go to one of those officer graduations. You see someone with perhaps medal ribbons not on their uniform already. They've already served before, and when you talk to them and you find their story, it's always a really great one. And somewhere behind you are their family members, husbands, wives, parents, close friends, who are as proud as punch that they have ended up there at that day. It's a great day.
One of the things that kind of impressed me from day one of joining Air Command and talking to various officers around the piece was just as Rich said there, when you talk to people about the backgrounds, just how many people have come from humble origins, if I can put it like that, and made a successful career in the Air Force. One of the officers I worked with quite closely when I first started, he was Group Captain Tone Baker, because he was in the CAT team. He was in the opposite mine when I started in High Wycombe, Cap and Tone would tell me the story of arriving through the gates as an apprentice at Cosford, and how proud he was to be able to do that. And in his aspiration when I first met him, he says, well, where's your next move then? And he says, I want to be group captain. I want to be the station commander at Cosford. And it was great. I remember when he got the appointment to be group captain at Cosford, just going around and shaking his hand and saying, well done. And he was proud as punch to be able to do that, to go back those 20 odd years later and say that I would stand in front of the apprentices coming in and say, I walked through those gates as a 16-year-old, whatever it was, and look at me now. Look at what is possible in this organisation.
And actually, on the Tone Baker story, because Tone worked for me, and I think it is a fantastic story. The other thing that happened with him was I was fortunate enough to be the one that had to tell him that he'd been awarded an OBE. And you think of, that moment where he would go to Buckingham Palace or Windsor Castle for the investiture, having started the Air Force as an apprentice, it is a really great thing. And actually, he was a brilliant role model for all of those young engineers going through the training at Cosford's, where all of our engineers, or most of them, do their training. And to be there as a figurehead, having started as an apprentice, was just fantastic.
Gents, I have one last question for you. I'm going to ask you each in turn. What would you say in terms of social mobility, if you could meet your 13-year-old self, what would be the one piece of advice you would give yourself?
Don't let anybody tell you can't do anything, and actually start thinking now. Aim high, look around, you see what opportunities are out there. But yeah, have more confidence in yourself, because that's a big thing. We touched on that earlier in terms of that imposter syndrome that lots of people feel actually when you talk to them. So have confidence in yourself, have confidence in your abilities, and don't let anybody tell you can't do something.
And for you, sir?
So I think for me, I actually sort of look back and think, pardon me, I wouldn't change anything. I've everything, I've been really lucky and it's worked out. But there is one important thing though. I didn't have any backup plan. I was so keen on the Air Force. It's what I wanted to do. I knew I was going to join the Air Force before my A-level results even came out. So my grades were 2 C's and a D. Not enough that would have got me to go to university. Not enough to really get me a great job. So I think if you have something that you really want, you might be lucky. It might all work out. But think about your backup plan and actually, just work hard at school. Get involved in things, not just academically, and make sure that there's another option for you. Because while I'm immensely proud of being in the Air Force and of the people I work alongside, it might be that you get your satisfaction in life through some other way, and that's great as well. The main thing is, as Steve said, not to be put off by anyone. Just go for it.
The Chief of the Air Staff's Fellowship Scheme, or CAS Fellowship, is a unique opportunity for anyone of any rank in the RAF to develop and improve personally in academia. It also aims to advance the intellectual capital within the RAF. In an interview originally recorded for BFBS, Inside Air's Flight Lieutenant Amy Casey found out more.
My name is Simon Edwards, and I'm in the Royal Air Force, and I'm the Assistant Chief of the Air Staff for Strategy.
Well, that sounds like a very busy job, I'm not going to lie. What do you actually do? What's the day-to-day for you?
There's no such day-to-day in my job. It's like many people, no ordinary job. A lot of responsibility. I work in the Ministry of Defence. I look after the Royal Air Force's strategy. I also keep an eye on our international relationships and also how we engage across government as well. And then I run our media and comms and all kinds of other connections to help the Air Force run well. And the best way of describing it is in the Air Staff, we're there to be as helpful as we can be to make sure it runs well.
Well, tell me a little bit about your service. I mean, where did it all begin for you?
I was an air cadet. I was a very keen air cadet back in the day. And I was quite fortunate that I applied when I was, 15, 16 years old for a scholarship, a sixth form scholarship, it was known as, which got me selected. It got me a flying scholarship as an air cadet. And then after my A-levels, it gave me a place in officer training. So I came in straight after school and I've loved every day since. It's just been brilliant.
I mean, you've done so much within your career. Could you pick a highlight at this point?
Apart from this interview with you today, you mean? So I like everybody, I get my energy from people and I have a very strong sense of service. So I particularly enjoyed squadron commands and having the privilege of looking after and being responsible for our C-17 squadron was definitely a highlight. The people, the aircraft, the whole force and the relevance of what we do. I really enjoy being a part of the Air Mobility Force, and no more so than when I had my own squadron to look after. That is no question the highlight of my career.
One of the things we talk about in the Royal Air Force often is the opportunities that are afforded to us. And one of these opportunities that we're going to talk about today is the CAS Fellowship. So tell me, what is the CAS Fellowship?
Well, CAS Fellowship, very simply, is an opportunity to any of our aviators. In fact, it's open to the whole force as well, to go and study at a master's level or even higher than that in academia. Professional military education is the best way of putting it. You can go and do a master's, you can go and do doctorate qualifications, you go into academia to get stuck into something that you're gonna find interesting, that you're gonna be able to bring to life, and then you're gonna be able to bring back to the Air Force for our organisation learning and help us on our journey.
So why has it been set up? Was there a gap in that knowledge?
It's not that there's a gap in knowledge. There's something quite powerful about any organisation that learns, and the Air Force is most certainly one of those. When I look at my career, I mean, I haven't had the opportunity for a CAS fellowship, but every time I do go on any kind of training, the more you do of it, the more you realise it's not just what you're learning, it's how you're thinking. It's not that there's a gap, it's just that the more thinking we have, the more opportunity we can offer people, the more thinking we get back into our organisation and the more learning that we do. Like any education and any of the development that we do is important. It's about the totality of it. But the CAS fellowships are right at the top of that tree, if you like. We really are looking for the best people to go out there and to get stuck in at that master's doctorate level.
I love that. And that's really resonated with me as a reserve, to have the opportunity to go to Cranwell and to experience that military thinking, that military learning. It's certainly something that I've been able to bring back to Civvy Street. And I found that a very, very useful, powerful tool. But coming back to the fellowship now, why do you think this is important for people to be afforded this opportunity?
Well, when we think about what the Air Force does, its purpose is to deliver air and space power to protect the nation. Okay, that's what we're for. And if we're always going to be able to do that, then we're always going to be on a journey, because we have to be able to deliver that today, tomorrow, and in the years ahead. There's no question. And so whenever we're thinking about what that future might look like, either in the long term or even today, how might we go about this? What might we do? What threats might we face, or how might we have to organise ourselves? All of those thinking, that's conceptual thinking. It's looking at matters in a different way. And so by getting people to go and really focus on some of those key issues, to come back with those ideas and thinking, really helps inform our concepts. And we hear the phrase conceptual thinking, but that's what it is. What might this look like? What might we do? How could we proceed? And it's essential that we get a real cross-section of views and thoughts. And the CAS Fellowship is an opportunity to really drill into some of them and come back and give that value back into the organisation, and also learn and grow yourself. Kind of match your own journey with the journey of the Air Force.
And this conceptual thinking, this isn't just about, the officers getting the opportunity here. This is open for everybody, isn't it?
Yeah, there's all sorts of things. If any rank, there are some aspects that are pretty much open to anyone, definitely across the whole force. There's opportunity in this for so many people. And of course, that's right. Who's to say that your rank or your role suggests that you wouldn't get the most out of this or offer the most back? Whenever I'm trying to take a view or to take any issue forward, that the more opinions I can seek, the more people I speak to, the greater the value. And rank has nothing to do with that.
So when we look at the RAF, the advancement in technology, our future capability, it's a really exciting time for us. Do you think the training will follow along that kind of line? Will there be future training opportunities like this for personnel?
It's training our people and giving them the skills that they need you're absolutely right. It's fundamental. Every aviator, every member of the whole force, we've got to keep pace. We've got to keep our skills up. We've got to keep the right thinking going. You're quite right that the Air Force is embracing modern technology. It is delivering that future, that next generation Royal Air Force. And that journey that we're on, so that we will always be ready to deliver our purpose, to deliver air and space power to protect the nation. That's the journey we've called Astra. And part of that journey has to be igniting the innovative and technically minded spirit and DNA of our aviators and the whole force. So the CAS Fellowship is absolutely key to that, as is always asking ourselves, So what are we missing? What more training do we need? Where might we look? And actually, when it comes to CAS fellowships, that real high-level view of the most important things that are really going to matter to the Air Force is key to informing that journey. What pathways do we make sure we're walking to develop our people in the right way? So when we get to where we're going, we've got the right skills with us.
Will personnel who are undertaking these fellowships have the time that they need to apply themselves academically? And what about the benefits personally and also for the RAF?
A lot of the fellowships are full-time. That's almost the point of doing it at this level. You really do get to go, and it's all you will do. It's go into academia, focus on this, think differently, learn and bring all of that value back for yourself and for us. And that really is what's so good about the CAS fellowship. And then equally in your part-time as well, because not all fellowships have to be full-time. That opportunity to make time in your day to deliver this, because after all, you've been applied for it, that you have the support of the organisation to then help deliver what we've asked of you. So it's definitely a two-way street here, because there's value for both. You know, we want you to do this. We want people to apply for this. And so we have to support them in delivering it because we want the return. You know, we want that learning. We want that new ways of thinking. And that includes making sure that you've got what you need. And there's grants for books and all the rest of it. But to me, what this gives you is the time. If there's one precious commodity in anybody's life, it's having the time. And that's what a CAS fellowship does for you, no question.
What about when you've undertaken this work, and we've talked about this return back to the Royal Air Force, the successful candidates that do get selected, how are they going to shape the RAF? And I mean, is there going to be any like hidden workloads or anything like that are going to jump out at them when they've finished all of this good stuff?
First of all, I would encourage anybody who's got the slightest excitement about this opportunity that the CAS fellowship would bring to them to go and take a proper look at the application process. It's very easy to do. I just did it just before I came on this interview. I just Googled CAS fellowship. The second hit was the TEDA Leadership Academy, and I can get on them through Twitter and send them a message, say, help, how do I apply? So it's dead easy. If you go to the Defence homepage and you put CAS Fellowship in the search bar, the first hit that comes up is the Defence notice that you need to apply. So if you have a look on that, there's quite a lot of detail in that, which I would encourage anyone to have a look at. It's a short document, but there's lots of detail. And what you'll see in that is that once you've done your work, your dissertation, it makes you really attractive for some of the opportunities that the Air Force is looking at. So, for example, I know that there's people who've done their CAS fellowships in sustainability, and they're now involved in our net zero program. And that would be one example. The Space Force would be another. That there are people involved in Space Command and the Space Force who have done CAS fellowships in that arena. So it's clear from what I can see that when you go and take this opportunity, that we absolutely then welcome you back with a view to using that in a daily basis. I look at one opportunity where I know we've got somebody doing a master's in innovation and how organisations innovate. And the plan for that would be to when they come back, to get them involved in the Astra team in some way, to challenge how we innovate in the Air Force, for example. So there's plenty of opportunity to bring that learning back and then to bring it to bear.
I mean, if you looked at how this translates the cost on Civvy Street alone, I mean, you're talking about a mortgage here. It's just such a great opportunity, isn't it? Is there a message for anyone who's heard this interview today that might be thinking of just having a little look? Maybe it might be suitable for them.
It's the message I use quite often to aviators and the whole force is, first of all, don't underestimate yourself. If you think this might have something in it for you, then don't assume it doesn't and go and take a look. Because we really do need people who think this might be within them or they kind of know it is. It is easy to find the detail that you need. It is easy to find the application form that you need. So for anyone who is keen to develop themselves, who has thought about something that would benefit the Air Force and how it goes about its business, to help us set the pace on the Astra journey, then don't underestimate yourself or what the course might do for you. Just take a look and go for it, because you just never know how it might land. And I have no doubt the right people are in our organisation to help us think in the right ways to get us to the right place.
Air Vice Marshal Simon Edwards, an absolute pleasure to talk to you today. Thank you for your time.
It's a pleasure. Thank you for your time as well.
This is Reheat on Inside Air, and with your latest RAF news, I'm AC Ben Russell. I-STAR capabilities at RAF Waddington are to be given a boost thanks to a double injection of investment. 51 squadrons, 3 Air Seeker aircraft will benefit from an extension to the support arrangement with the US government as part of a £970 million deal. The partnership was due to expire in 2025, but will now continue until Rivet Joint's UK out-of-service date in 2035. Meanwhile, a £110 million contract awarded to technology firm Raytheon UK will see 14 squadrons Shadow surveillance fleet increased from 6 aircraft to 8 and updated with the latest UK Sovereign Defence Aid System. In other news, RAF aviators are among the latest volunteers to be mobilised to help ease the pressure on the Welsh Ambulance Service. They're being trained alongside sailors from the Royal Navy and will join soldiers from the Royal Logistics Corps already on task. And 3 gunners have made history by becoming the first women to join Honington's Reserve's Force Protection Squadron. LAC's Hannah Knowles, Sarah Bailey and Levi Smith completed Exercise Omega and will now join 2623 Squadron. Schoolhouse mistress and mother of 2 LAC Bailey said she'd been incredibly well supported throughout her training and felt very proud to be joining such an inclusive and welcoming corps. And in sport, the RAF regular and reserve Kawasaki team saw its season end on a high at Brands Hatch. Lewis Rollo continued his run of good form to finish 4th in the Pirelli Superstock race, which sees him end the season in 8th place on 155 points in the National Championship standings. Meanwhile, teammate Ryan Vickers produced his best finish to a season, coming in 12th in the Bennett's British Superbike Championships after also securing 12th place in the final race of the year. And that's Reheat on Inside Air.
I'm SAC Simon Ross with this episode's Name That Noise. That was the sound of an underslung grenade launcher being loaded and fired at the Senny Bridge training area in Wales, otherwise known as Centre. RAF Regiment gunners are specialists in dismounted close combat tactics, fieldcraft, and how air operations are conducted. The live firing tactical training package allows personnel to operate a wide variety of weapon systems, including individual weapons through to machine guns and anti-tank systems, as well as an impressive array of state-of-the-art surveillance systems. Shooting practices such as moving targets and automatic firing with the L85A3 rifle are completed as part of the training, along with the Section 2 ICs utilising the underslung grenade launcher, which dramatically increases firepower.
That's all for this episode of Inside Air. Please give us a review and subscribe on your favourite podcast app, and join us again soon.
You've been listening to Inside Air, a behind-the-wire view of the Royal Air Force, its people, technology and operations. If you're serving in the RAF and have a story for us, please speak to your unit media and communications officer. Inside Air is written and produced for the Royal Air Force by RAF Media Reserves.